Hey guys, it's Madison Estes. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be going over the best and worst horror films of 2025. So similar to last year, instead of just ranking them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is what everybody does, I decided to give each film its own little special title. So for instance, there's best comedy horror, best body horror, goriest horror film, etc. And at the end, I'm going to go over my top 3 worst horror films of the year. So first up on my list is best sci-fi horror, and I have to say this was probably my second favorite horror film overall because it just hits so many tropes that I like, and that is Companion. Companion is about a girl named Iris who goes on a vacation with her boyfriend and his friends, and then in order to tell you any more about this film, I would probably have to get into spoilers. I know this film has been spoiled a lot this year. Like, even when it first came out, people were kind of giving the big twist away in the description. I'm not going to do that here, but I definitely think that if there's any film on this list you haven't seen, this is one that I would definitely check out if you like more thriller, psychological horror films, although there is quite a bit of gore in this as well. Another reason I love this film, besides the fact that it's thrilling and it has so many comedic moments, is that it's just such an original concept and it's a great commentary on relationships. I give Companion 5 out of 5 stars. Next up is Best Body Horror, and this year I'm giving that to Bring Her Back. Bring Her Back is about 2 kids that end up in foster care with a foster mother who has ulterior motives. I didn't love everything about this film because I feel like it meandered a little bit in the middle, and there's one subplot where there's another boy who's being fostered along with them who becomes somewhat possessed and starts somewhat possessed. He becomes possessed and he starts like eating objects, which is where a lot of the great body horror comes in. But at some point they kind of overdo it and it sort of just becomes like, okay, what's the billy goat demon gonna eat next? So that's the only complaint I have with this film, other than a little bit of meandering in the middle. Is just the fact that they do kind of overdo it a little for my taste. I'm very much a show me 1 or 2 really horrifying things in a horror film, and I'll probably remember it more than if you keep showing me the same thing. But I have to say they did it really well, and they did a good job of escalating it too, so that just whenever you think, okay, the film has hit its moment, you know, that's going to be the most shocking thing, something else happens that just kind of makes you cringe and just it definitely hits on a very visceral level. I give Bring Her Back 4 out of 5 stars. This category is a bit silly. It's called Horror Film That I Did Not Even Think That I Would Like. Last year that went to Tarot, which was kind of my guilty pleasure film of the year, and this year it goes to Final Destination Bloodlines. If you remember earlier in the year, I posted a short which was my 3 least anticipated horror films of the year, and this film was on it. So I thought the reason I wasn't going to like it is because I feel like the last several installments of the series have kind of just been copying the same formula over and over. And this one does take a few familiar beats from previous installments, but I feel like they did so much that was original in this film. This one was a little bit different because it starts off with the main character having a vision of a different girl escaping death and saving a bunch of people, and then you find out how she's connected to this girl. I thought the way that they connected these characters was really smart. I loved the logic behind it and the world building, that not only will death come after you if you escape, but it'll come after all of your descendants as well. There is a little bit of a plot hole, I believe, when you think about how many people were realistically saved versus how long it takes death to get through people. You know, it seems like he goes through them pretty fast in the previous movies. Like, within a week or 2, almost everybody's dead. So I feel like if you did the math, like you really did the math, death would have caught up with her a lot sooner. But if you just ignore that, which I did, you can really appreciate how they did a lot of really original things with this. Plus, there's just so many great death sequences. I mean, Final Destination as a franchise, no matter how derivative it gets, it always brings really interesting death scenes, and I think Bloodlines was probably the best yet in terms of really interesting deaths. I thoroughly enjoyed the entire movie. I was on the edge of my seat, and I thought the ending, although a little predictable, was very satisfying. I give Final Destination Bloodlines 4.5 out of 5 stars. Speaking of movies that you kind of have to ignore a few plot holes in order to enjoy, the best horror comedy of the year is Until Dawn. Until Dawn is about a group of young adults that go on a small road trip because one of their friends tried to kill herself because her sister is missing, and they're trying to distract her and provide emotional support. And while they're on this road trip, she discovers where her sister might have gone, and then whenever they follow the trail, they end up trapped in a time loop. Not only are they in a time loop, but they seem to have arrived at a eldritch location that is full of monsters that are trying to kill them. And every time they go through this time loop, every single one of them dies. And this keeps happening over and over, and they have to figure out how to stop it, because if they go through the time loop too many times, they're going to die permanently. It's an interesting concept, and I think they did a good job with it. The atmosphere is also one of my favorite parts of this film. It really does feel like Silent Hill in a lot of ways. There's like a creepy house that just suddenly appears whenever they start one of the time loops. There's all these new monsters that keep creeping up. So you think that it's like maybe going to be a slasher film, and then it turns into something else, and it's always kind of keeping you on your toes. Watching their reactions to their friends dying over and over again kind of becomes hilarious, even though it doesn't really shy away from the gore and the grotesqueness. So they're still freaking out every time it happens, but it doesn't go that far into comedy. I feel like there was a really good balance in this film of being a horror film, but also having a lot of comedy as well. I give Until Dawn 4 out of 5 stars. Next up is Best Weird Horror Film, and that goes to Together. In this movie, a couple, played by real-life spouses Allison Brie and Dave Franco, begin having relationship problems. Those problems are made much worse whenever one of them ends up visiting this weird cave, and whenever they come out, they find that they are physically stuck together at times. It's amazing how this concept is able to actually sustain an entire film, because I was skeptical whenever I knew what this film was about, thinking, okay, this sounds like a good short film, but I'm not sure how they're going to stretch this, pun intended, to an entire film. But I actually think that they did a really good job, because the focus was on the relationship. It's definitely making some kind of statement about possibly codependency, or maybe just relationships in general. And I think whatever statement they were trying to make works really well. The end of the movie is very surprising. I definitely did not see that coming, and kind of disturbing, but in more of an existential way than anything else. And there's a lot of scenes of body horror that are both disturbing and kind of funny at the same time. I give Together 4 out of 5 stars. Now for Most Slept On Horror Film. That title goes to The Home, starring Pete Davidson. This movie has had so many mixed reviews. I personally thought that it was incredibly entertaining. It does meander in the middle. That's my biggest criticism. There's a few points where I got really bored in the middle of the film, just kind of waiting for like the next reveal or waiting for some sort of plot advancement. But I think the beginning is really strong. You have Pete Davidson, who is an adult that has aged out of foster care. He's kind of just drifting through life with no real plans, and he gets caught doing environmental graffiti where he's making a statement about global warming, and he ends up having to get community service where he works at a nursing facility. Pete Davidson does a good job playing this character that's a little bit depressed, but he has really good intentions, and he really cares about the elderly people he's working with. There's also so many great moments in the film that's kind of played for laughs, but I really liked it because it's how a real person would respond in that situation, and it almost feels like it's breaking the fourth wall with how realistic it is. Like there's one part where an elderly woman says something really cryptic, and in a horror film, a lot of times it would just cut to the next scene, or maybe the main character would like show a fear reaction and then it would cut to another scene, or the door would shut and that character would just walk away. But Pete Davidson's like, no, you can't just say that. You need to explain what you just said. What does that mean? And it was just, I'm paraphrasing, but it was just such a great reaction, because I always think that when I'm watching horror films, like, okay, character just left a cryptic clue and they're gonna walk off and probably die before the main character can unravel what that clue means. But in this case, Pete Davidson's just like, no, you can't do that. You have to explain it. And I just loved that. And there was a couple of moments throughout the film like that, and I wish we could kind of see a little bit more of that in horror films in general. I also loved the ending. I think out of all of the horror films I've seen this year, it's my favorite ending out of anything. It's just so much fun. Pete Davidson nails it. He has that sort of manic energy that is required for that ending to work, and I just loved it. I loved the whole last several minutes of this film. There's definitely a few moments in the middle that feel flat, but I feel like it has a very strong beginning and ending. There's so many interesting moments in between, and I think that the ending is just a really good time. I give The Home 3 out of 5 stars. Next up is both what I feel is the goriest and scariest horror film of the year, and that is No Tears in Hell. This movie is based off of a real-life serial killer slash cannibal who murdered and cannibalized people with his mother. The fact that it's inspired by a true killer, I'm sure definitely adds a lot to why this film feels so horrifying, knowing that, a lot of the victims were based on real people as well. But also, I think just how graphic and gory it is a huge part of what makes this so disturbing. Also, the relationship with his mother is explored throughout the film, and it's borderline incestuous, very uncomfortable. There's just so many moments where it feels like she really was grooming him to be a predator, even if she didn't realize it. And then, of course, there's also so many really interesting moments where it seems as though she's both repulsed by the son she created, but also weirdly proud of him. It's so bizarre, and I think that the relationship between these two characters is what really ties this movie together, even when it feels like, the plot could be kind of going in weird directions because it's like, okay, now we're with a new victim, and now we have a new detective on the case. But, that relationship between those two is the most interesting part, and I feel like that's what really ties all of the scenes together. Also, I did a little bit of research on the real-life killer after I watched the movie because I was just so enthralled with the film. And he also killed a lot of kids, which I thought was very interesting that they didn't put that in the film. And I really don't know why. I think that would have made it a lot more haunting. I mean, if there's anything they could have done to make this more disturbing, it would have been hurting animals or kids. And all I could think of is maybe they wanted you to kind of relate to the character. I didn't. I thought he was a monster throughout the film, but I still just thought he was a very interesting, charismatic monster. I definitely wanted him to get caught, but it was just so interesting seeing not really how he evaded the police, because the police seemed very incompetent, but like how he just continued to get away with it and how he continued to use his charisma to lure people into his apartment. I give No Tears in Hell 4.5 out of 5 stars. This is another kind of silly category. It is Best Non-Horror Horror Film of the Year, and that goes to Megan 2.0. I feel like Megan doesn't really need an explanation because it's just such a huge part of pop culture, but in case you've been living under a rock, Megan is about a form of artificial intelligence that was designed to protect and befriend a little girl, and it ends up going evil. That was the first film. The second film decides to take the premise and change it slightly by having another evil AI take over, and it's, trying to kill a bunch of people, and the little girl's in danger, and so is her aunt who has custody of her, and they have to resort to asking Megan for help in order to protect them from the new evil robot. I thought this was a really good premise, and I have to admit, Megan 2.0 was another movie that I put on my list of least anticipated horror films that I didn't think was going to be good. And I have to admit, it is not a good horror film. It doesn't really even try to be a horror film. In my opinion, it's more sci-fi comedy, which is why I made this category. But I think that it's just so much fun. I had to talk about it because this is one of the films I had the most fun seeing in theaters this year. And honestly, what really makes this film work is just Megan, the character. She's so sassy. She has so many great one-liners, and the plot is just always changing. There's so many plot twists and shifts in the plot. So it's just a really fun film that I recommend for pretty much anyone. I give Megan 2.0 4.5 out of 5 stars. My pick for Best Horror Film of the Year is The Long Walk. The Long Walk is a film about a walking competition where 50 boys from around the country compete in order to be the winner. The winner gets one wish granted by the government plus a ton of money, but all of the losers are executed along the way. I have been looking forward to this film for 15 years, ever since I read The Long Walk whenever I was in high school. And it was everything that I thought it would be. They did change the ending from the book, but I honestly think all of the changes that they made sense. I don't think that the book ending would have worked as well as a visual medium, and I think that they did such a good job with the ending overall. The patriotic music that's playing, the crowd cheering and roaring in excitement as, the last two characters are dying basically, or at least, on the verge of just giving up. And I think that they did so many good changes with the film. I was rereading the book this year, and there's one part I'm pretty sure that was not in the book where they talk about what they would do with their wish. One of the characters says, I would wish for there to be two winners. Second to last gets to keep their life, and the winner gets, the same deal, the prize and the money and stuff. And he was like, because, I think that you should get to get through the walk with a friend. There's just such a strong theme of friendship in this film, despite the fact that it's a competition to the death, because they're not actively killing each other. I think that that is what enables them to have really strong bonds. And of course, the film is a metaphor for war. I think the book was supposed to be a metaphor for the Vietnam War, and I think the film is a little bit more, it could apply to pretty much any war. You have the lottery where they all put their names in and they get picked, and it's a lot kind of like the draft system. And then, of course, you have them talking about, like, at the very beginning, oh, they're all excited, they're all very naive, and then later on, as the walk advances, they're all talking about, why did I do this? Why did I put my name in? And it's like, well, because we were all brainwashed into thinking that that's what we needed to do. And then as the walk goes on and they're starting to get tired and they're starting to kind of reckon with their own mortality and realize that they probably signed up to die and that they're not going to be the winner, it just gets more and more bleak. And whenever you think it can't get more bleak, it still does. There's so many heartbreaking moments, and there's also so many bone-chilling moments as well whenever the boys are executed because they're no longer able to walk or because they've just completely given up in mind and spirit. The characters are just so interesting that you're constantly pulled into their backstories and their motivations and, why they signed up or why they think they signed up. And it's just really fascinating. I really wasn't bored at any point, and somehow they managed to keep the tension constant. The horror comes from the fascist government. It comes from, knowing that death is inevitable for so many of the boys. It comes from, the gore itself. There's characters that are disemboweled. There's, all these really horrible deaths that happen throughout the film. But I really think it's just sort of the existential dread that is throughout the entire film, brought up again and again, that I think really makes this film so horrifying and bleak. I give The Long Walk 5 out of 5 stars. Now for my top 3 worst horror films of the year. There's actually a lot more, but I'm just gonna focus on the top 3 because I don't want to just get overwhelmed with the bad horror films. So number 3 is The Shrouds. This movie, oh my god, it was just a clusterfuck. And I don't say that lightly. There was just so much happening, but there was no plot advancement throughout the entire movie. It's just things happening. So the movie is about a guy who creates some kind of weird system where you can watch the bodies of your dead ones decompose in their casket. Like, I guess it's just a camera they stick in the coffin that, charges itself somehow. I don't know, maybe it thrives off maggots. And you can look in at your loved one's decomposing corpse whenever you want, because that's a thing. Yeah, so interesting concept. But like I said, there's no plot. It doesn't go anywhere. It's, all about this guy who's mourning the guy that designed it. He's mourning his wife. He designed it so he could watch his wife decompose. He keeps having these nightmares where his wife keeps losing body parts and he keeps having sex with her and she keeps losing more body parts. And I thought maybe that was leading to something. And then there's also this weird AI on his phone that has a weird relationship with him. I thought that was leading somewhere. Then there's some kind of conspiracy about, like, oh, your wife had, something that she shouldn't have had based on the cancer that she had. We found it in her, when we were watching the camera of her body decomposing. It shouldn't look like that. I thought that was going to lead somewhere, but literally none of these plots lead anywhere. It is such a huge waste of time. I can't even say it's a good grief horror film because it really just seems like this guy is obsessed with his wife's body. He doesn't really have any memories of her that get brought up in the film. You don't know why he even loves her or what their relationship was like, how they got together, what they bonded over. You don't know anything. It's all very much about her body. It's not even a good grief horror film. It's nothing. It's garbage. And it's not even entertaining enough to watch it for being a bad horror film. So, boo. I give this film 1.5 out of 5 stars. I'm only giving it the 0.5 because there was some really gory scenes at the beginning where you see the body decomposing, and I thought that was back when I thought this was going to be a good film, and then very quickly it just, descended into awfulness. So 1.5 out of 5 stars. Next up is Ash. I hated this film so much. How do you have a film with Aaron Paul that is so bad? I don't know. This is his worst film I've ever seen him in. Like, I love him so much, but he could not save this film. This is every stereotypical sci-fi film set in space where, there's a bunch of astronauts, or there were a bunch of astronauts. The whole team is missing. One of them has amnesia. She's got to figure out what happened, and surprise, surprise, aliens. Like, she spends the whole film trying to figure out this conspiracy. It's just aliens. That's all. It's always aliens. Maybe not always, but in this case it was. And it just felt like every single trope I've seen before, and I've seen it better in other films. The special effects were not great. I was so bored just waiting for anything interesting to happen. And then again, this is another film where the plot just felt all over the place. I think the main thing is just that it was so generic. It didn't have any originality at all. The characters were flat and boring. It was just not good. It was just like every cliche in the book. I give Ash 1 out of 5 stars. Next on my list, okay, this actually, now that I think about it, even though I saved it for number 1, I think this was probably still better than Ash. So whatever. The worst list is just, off the top of my head. In terms of just being so slow and boring, this was the worst out of all of them that I've seen this year. And that movie is Rosario. Okay, so this movie is about a girl whose mother passes away. She didn't have a good relationship with her. So she goes to her mom's apartment, and I don't know, I guess to like go through her things. I would think that you'd call 911 and wait for them to pick her up because she died at her home, but whatever. She goes there and she meets the neighbor Joe, who is the best part of this movie, played by David Desmalchin, and he's trying to get into the apartment because her mom, quote unquote, has his air fryer. And the way he delivers the line, the way his character feels really suspicious, I'm like, okay, it's definitely not an air fryer. He's trying to get in there because there's some secret, right? There's some conspiracy. And I spent like half the movie thinking, okay, he's going to be tied into whatever the mom was doing. The mom was doing some kind of weird witchcraft. That's probably how she died, and like her daughter was like super successful. So the witchcraft probably had something to do with the daughter's success. And I'm thinking the neighbor probably made a deal with the mom too. And he's trying to get in there to either get evidence or get, whatever the magical item is. He really was just trying to get his air fryer. And that's actually, even though like while I was watching it, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. That's so stupid. Like in retrospect, that's my favorite part of the movie. It's so hilarious that he really just wanted his fucking air fryer. It's almost delightful how bad it is, but I do have to say David Desmalchin nailed that role. He was the only entertaining thing in this film, and every time he was on screen, I was so excited. I was like, oh, what's this character gonna do next? Like, I wish the movie had been about his character, even if the whole movie had just been him trying to get the air fryer. I think it would have been better than what we had to sit through with this girl just like going through her mom's shit for like an hour and a half. So I have to say this, even though this was the worst horror film of the year, this is the best advertisement for an air fryer that I have ever seen. There's also a scene towards the end where the neighbor Joe gets in the apartment somehow, and whenever the girl is being attacked by a demon, the neighbor hits the demon over the head with his air fryer. That was the best part of the film, I think. After I saw this movie, I was like, I need to get an air fryer. I already have one, but I should get another one because Joe is right. You don't get pentagram palm whenever you have an air fryer. Now, there's a scene where the girl has like a pentagram on her palm, clearly from some kind of dark magic. And the neighbor's just like, is that a burn from, cooking oil on a stove? Like, you should really get an air fryer so that doesn't happen. Seriously, if you just like compiled all of the clips with this character and just put them together and it ended with him bashing the demon over the head with the air fryer, I think that would have that would be the best commercial ever. We really need to have more product placement in horror films, I think. At least in B horror films, Or we need to have more horror elements in our commercials. Maybe both. On a serious note, I feel like if the movie had just ended with that scene where he bashes the demon on the head with the air fryer and been like, the girl could have been like, how did you defeat the demon? He could just be like, ah, yes, this air fryer was made with holy metal, and then just ended it right there. I probably would rate this a lot higher. Unfortunately, the demon comes back, causes a little more chaos. It's a little bit more of my time, and then the ending was just really boring and kind of predictable, and it's nonsense. So, yeah, unfortunately, the highlight of the film was the demon getting, face smashed with an air fryer. So, awful film, great air fryer advertisement. I give Rosario 1 out of 5 stars. So that is my list of best and worst horror films of 2025. Let me know what you think of my choices in the comment section below, and tell me what you think the best and worst horror films were this year. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and be sure to subscribe. On this channel, I post reviews, writing advice, horror commentary, and blogs. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you later.